My husband nearly killed me, so I escaped and got a restraining order. Now, 1 year later, he's posting my private photos online and threatening me through flowers left on my doorstep. In my family, women were seen as property who were good for nothing but giving up our bodies and our lives to serve our husbands. I myself was married off at 18 to a family friend in his late 20s and expected to give him everything in exchange for him not beating me. From day one, my mom made it crystal clear what my job was. Your husband's happiness comes first. Your job, your dreams, they don't matter. And it wasn't just her words. It was in the way she treated my husband like he was a king whenever he walked into the house. He didn't even have to lift a finger. The second he walked through our door, my mom was at his side offering him food, telling me to go fetch him his favorite robe and slippers. Meanwhile, I'd spent the day cooking, cleaning, and trying to hold back my frustration and exhaustion. Over the years, I did everything to make my husband happy. Cooked his favorite dishes, wore outfits he liked when we went out, walked around our house unclothed and kept quiet when he laid hands on me. But the more I tried, the more he expected. And every time I had a new bruise, my mom would see it and tell me it was my fault for setting him off. Then one night, Ethan left his phone unlocked. I never snooped, but then a bing from a woman's name I didn't recognize told me to check. That's when I saw it. Endless texts between him and someone else. Romantic texts, photos, conversations where he vented about how I didn't do enough for him. My stomach twisted. I sat through scrolling the messages, long enough for my husband to come in and catch me. But when he caught me looking at his phone, he didn't apologize. He didn't lay hands on me like I expected either. Instead, he said, "See? This is exactly why I had to find someone else. You're always invading my space, suffocating me." I went to my mom hoping maybe she'd support me for once. But when I told her, she shook her head with a sigh. "What did you expect? You kept pushing and demanding attention. Men don't like that." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That was the moment I finally saw it. Just how deep this clearly toxic mindset went. I knew I needed to get out. I stayed silent about it at first, because I didn't want to lose them both. The idea of being completely alone terrified me. But then I started online therapy in secret, and my therapist slowly helped me realize my worth. I wasn't the problem in this marriage. I'd been conditioned to think I was. And with her emotional help, I started quietly gathering evidence of my husband's infidelity and abuse. For the first time ever, I started doing things for myself. Small things like secretly opening my own bank account, secretly looking for jobs, and even preparing a potential escape plan. My husband eventually found the documents I'd hidden. He exploded with anger, screaming, throwing things, accusing me of betrayal, laying hands on me until I was on the floor red, pouring out my mouth. He called my mom, and she rushed over. Not to comfort me, but to comfort Ethan. She turned on me instantly, yelling at me while I was still on the floor. That hurt more than the punches. In the weeks following, they started publicly shaming me to the family. Both of them working overtime to make everyone believe I was unstable, manipulative, and cruel. But by this point, something inside me finally snapped into place. The next day, despite my shaking hands and fear, I filed for divorce. I took every piece of evidence I had and prepared myself for the legal battle of my life. During the courtroom drama, I had to relive every painful detail of my marriage in front of strangers, defending myself against vicious accusations. My husband and my mom tried everything to break me down, painting me as selfish and unstable. But I stood my ground. And after what felt like forever, the judge ruled in my favor. When she announced her decision, the relief was so overwhelming I nearly collapsed. Melissa squeezed my arm in silent congratulation as my husband Ethan's lawyer whispered urgently to him. My mother sat rigid in her seat, lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt a lightness I'd never experienced, as if I could finally breathe freely for the first time in my life. The courthouse steps stretched before me as I emerged into the sunlight. My lawyer, Melissa, squeezed my shoulder reassuringly before returning inside to finalize paperwork. I paused, simply breathing, in and out, without anyone dictating how or when I should breathe. The air smelled fresh after a morning rain, and somewhere nearby a bird was singing. These simple sensations felt new and precious now that they were truly mine to experience. I noticed the texture of the stone steps beneath my feet, the gentle breeze against my face, all the small details I'd stopped appreciating during my marriage. Across the parking lot, I spotted Ethan and my mother huddled together, their faces contorted with hatred as they glared at me. Rather than looking away as I once would have, I held my head high and walked steadily toward my car. Ethan shouted that this wasn't over, demanding to know if I thought I could walk away with his money and reputation. I kept moving forward, fishing keys from my purse with slightly trembling hands. My mother's voice cut through the air next, calling me ungrateful, but I tuned them out, got into my car, and drove away. The familiar sedan felt different now. No longer Ethan's vehicle that I was permitted to use, but my transportation to freedom. I adjusted the seat and mirrors to my preference for the first time, a small act of reclaiming independence. My recently rented one-bedroom apartment awaited me. Nothing fancy, just basic secondhand furniture, but gloriously mine. No one could control or hurt me there. The apartment was on the second floor of a modest complex, with beige walls I was allowed to decorate however I wanted. The previous tenant had left behind curtains with a cheerful yellow pattern that brightened the small living room. I'd furnished it gradually over the previous weeks, sneaking away during Ethan's work hours to purchase necessities from thrift stores. A slightly worn couch with a colorful throw blanket, a kitchen table with mismatched chairs, dishes that weren't part of the expensive set Ethan had insisted on for our wedding registry. Each item represented a choice I'd made for myself. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in years, though I knew people like Ethan and my mother wouldn't simply accept defeat. The mattress was firmer than I was used to, but the sheets were soft and smelled of the lavender detergent I'd chosen. No one's arms held me down, no one's breath against my neck made me tense. Just quiet solitude and the distant sounds of the city outside my window. The harassment began subtly. A week after finalizing my divorce, I secured a position at a local bookstore shelving books and assisting customers. Dana, the manager, patiently trained me as I learned the responsibilities of my first independent job. The bookstore was a haven of quiet order. Shelves neatly arranged by genre and author, the smell of paper and coffee from the small cafe in the corner, soft music playing in the background. Dana was in her 40s with short gray streaked hair and reading glasses that hung from a beaded chain. She showed me how to use the inventory system, explaining everything clearly without making me feel stupid for asking questions. When I successfully completed my first transaction with a customer, she gave me a thumbs up from across the store that made me stand a little taller. Then mysterious calls started coming to the store. Someone would ask for me specifically, then hang up when I answered, happening 5 or 6 times daily. Each time the phone rang, my stomach tightened with dread. Sometimes there was just silence on the other end, sometimes heavy breathing, occasionally a muffled laugh before the click of disconnection. Dana noticed and expressed concern, but I minimized the situation, not wanting to seem problematic. Probably just kids making prank calls, I said with a forced smile, though we both knew better. I saw the worry in her eyes but was too afraid of losing this precious foothold of independence to acknowledge the danger. 2 weeks into my employment, Ethan's friend Gabriel appeared at the store asking for me by name, smirking as he mentioned Ethan's curiosity about my workplace. Gabriel and I had never gotten along. He was Ethan's college roommate who had always looked at me in ways that made my skin crawl. Seeing him in the bookstore, my safe space, felt like a violation. He browsed casually, picking up books and putting them back in the wrong places, watching me from the corner of his eye. "Ethan misses you," he said when I couldn't avoid him any longer. "He's worried about you being out here all alone." The threat was thinly veiled, his smile never reaching his cold eyes. I remained silent until he eventually left, then checked my apartment locks twice that night before sleeping. I pushed my nightstand against the door for good measure, the scraping sound on the carpet oddly comforting. Sleep came in fitful bursts, each noise from the building or street jolting me awake with racing heart. The next morning revealed all 4 of my car tires slashed. The sight of my car sitting lopsided in the parking lot, rubber deflated and sad, brought tears of frustration to my eyes. I ran my fingers over the jagged cuts in the rubber, not random punctures, but deliberate, angry slices that spoke of personal hatred. After calling a tow truck, I arrived late to work, where Dana showed understanding when I vaguely mentioned my difficult divorce. "Take all the time you need," she said, handing me a cup of tea from the cafe. "We've got your back here." Her kindness nearly broke me. I wasn't used to support without conditions attached. That weekend, I returned home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Nothing appeared missing, but everything felt violated. My clothes had been rearranged, photos hung crookedly, and my toothbrush was wet. Someone had invaded my space, touching my belongings, sending the message they could reach me any time. The violation was profound. I stood in the doorway, unable to step inside for several minutes. The air smelled different. Someone else's cologne lingered faintly. In the bathroom, my toiletries had been rearranged. Not dramatically, but just enough to notice. My toothbrush sat in its holder, bristles damp. I threw it away immediately, gagging at the thought of someone using it. The police filed a report but offered little help beyond suggesting I change my locks, which I did immediately. The locksmith was sympathetic, installing an additional deadbolt at a discount when I explained the situation. "Get yourself a doorstop for extra security," he advised, demonstrating how to wedge it under the door from the inside. 3 days later, Dana called me into her office and showed me an email from a concerned citizen, claiming I was mentally unstable with a history of theft. Attached was a photo of me entering my therapist's office, clearly taken without my knowledge. I recognized my mother's distinctive writing style instantly, the formal phrasing with occasional dramatic flourishes, the way she underlined certain words for emphasis. The photo showed me from behind, head down as I entered the nondescript office building where Dr. Lydia practiced. The angle suggested someone had been following me, watching and waiting for the right moment. The thought made my skin crawl, knowing I'd been observed during what should have been a private moment. Dana assured me she didn't believe these accusations but needed to understand my situation. I broke down and revealed everything about Ethan, the abuse, and my mother's betrayal. Dana listened attentively and advised me to document all harassment and consider a restraining order. Her office was small but comfortable, with a potted plant in the corner and photos of her family on the desk. As I spoke, tears streaming down my face, she pushed a box of tissues toward me without interrupting. When I finished, she didn't offer platitudes or empty sympathy, just practical advice and genuine concern. Following her advice, I began keeping detailed records of every suspicious incident, hang-up calls, strange vehicles outside my apartment, and moments when I felt watched in public. I bought a small notebook with a lock, recording dates, times, and descriptions of each occurrence. The pages filled quickly, a documented pattern of intimidation and control. The harassment escalated when I discovered dozens of accounts created in my name on dating sites, job boards, and loan applications I'd never authorized. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications from sites I'd never visited, messages from strangers responding to my posts. One dating profile described me as looking for rough play with multiple partners, using a photo clearly taken from my Facebook page before I deleted it. That same day, 3 coworkers received anonymous texts containing photoshopped images of me in compromising positions. Nicole, one of my colleagues, showed me her phone with concern, assuring me she knew the images were fake. I recognized Ethan's computer skills in the crude forgeries. Nicole was the newest employee besides me, a college student with bright blue hair and a perpetual supply of energy. She showed me her phone during our lunch break, sliding it across the table with an apologetic expression. "I figured you should know what's going around," she said quietly. The image was clearly my face pasted onto someone else's body in a sexually explicit pose. My landlord, Mr. Bell, soon approached me about complaints regarding noise, frequent male visitors, and alleged substance paraphernalia in my trash. He was an older man with bushy eyebrows and a permanent frown, but his eyes showed more confusion than accusation as he relayed these complaints. After I explained my situation and showed him my immaculate apartment, his expression softened as he mentioned his sister had experienced similar post-divorce harassment. He agreed to ignore the false complaints, but warned me that people like my ex-husband rarely give up easily. "They can't stand losing control," he said, standing in my doorway. "Be careful, and let me know if you notice anyone suspicious hanging around the building." The following week brought a letter from Ethan's lawyer claiming I defamed him during our divorce proceedings and demanding both a public retraction and substantial financial compensation. The official letterhead and formal language were intimidating, designed to frighten me into compliance. The envelope sat on my kitchen table like a bomb waiting to explode. My attorney Melissa assured me the lawsuit was baseless given our evidence, but warned that fighting it would drain my limited resources. Exactly what Ethan wanted. "It's a scare tactic," she explained during our phone call. "He's hoping you'll panic and give in." Her voice was calm and steady, a counterpoint to my racing thoughts. That evening, as I sat on my small balcony, I received a text from an unknown number containing a photo of me in that exact moment and location, forcing me to keep my curtains permanently closed thereafter. The photo showed me from below, clearly taken from the parking lot. I could see the mug of tea in my hands, the book open on my lap. The message below simply read, "Enjoying the view?" I scrambled inside, heart pounding, and pulled the curtains shut with shaking hands. The balcony, once my favorite spot for quiet evenings, became another forbidden space. I huddled on my couch that night, lights off, afraid to move around my own apartment. The next morning, Dana informed me someone had contacted the bookstore owner claiming I was stealing inventory and reselling it online, complete with convincing screenshots. Her normally cheerful face was serious as she showed me the email the owner had forwarded to her. The accusation was detailed and specific, mentioning titles and quantities of books allegedly missing. The owner, Kenneth, reviewed security footage and confirmed the timestamps on the screenshots didn't match my working hours, and inventory records showed nothing missing. Kenneth was rarely in the store, preferring to handle the business side remotely, so his visit was unusual. He was shorter than I expected, with round glasses and a methodical way of speaking. As he left, he warned that whoever targeted me wasn't merely trying to get me fired, but systematically destroying my credibility everywhere. "They're trying to isolate you," he said, his voice matter of fact. "Make it impossible for you to find work, housing, or support." The clinical way he assessed my situation was oddly comforting. He saw it as a problem to solve, not a drama to judge. My therapist suggested I consider going public with my story, explaining that abusers like Ethan and my mother thrive in secrecy and count on my shame and isolation. Dr. Lydia leaned forward during our video session, her expression serious. "Secrecy protects them, not you," she said. "Consider how much energy you're spending hiding what they've done." Though terrified of exposing my most painful experiences, I spent the weekend creating a detailed timeline of the harassment with all available evidence, the fake listings, photoshopped images, defamatory letter, and screenshots of accounts created in my name. My small kitchen table disappeared under printouts, screenshots, and notes as I organized everything chronologically. Monday morning, I posted everything online across multiple platforms, naming names and sharing photos of bruises from before my divorce. My hands trembled as I hit publish on each platform, releasing my private pain into the public sphere. I felt simultaneously exposed and relieved, like ripping off a bandage from a wound that needed air to heal. By lunchtime, my phone overflowed with supportive messages from former classmates, distant relatives, and strangers. Local news picked up the story, and people I hadn't spoken with in years shared their own negative experiences with Ethan and my mother, validating my account. For the first time, they faced public scrutiny, instead of me. A former colleague of Ethan's messaged about witnessing his controlling behavior at company events. A neighbor from my childhood recalled my mother's harsh treatment. Each message reinforced that I wasn't crazy, that others had seen glimpses of what I'd experienced behind closed doors. Ethan called from an unknown number, his voice unnervingly calm as he warned I'd made everything worse for myself. I recognized his reasonable tone, the one he used right before his worst outbursts. "You've really done it now," he said quietly. "Hope you're ready for what comes next." The familiar threat in his voice sent ice through my veins. I ended the call without responding and blocked the number, refusing to let fear control me any longer. My hand shook as I set down the phone, but I took deep breaths until the panic subsided. This was exactly what he wanted, for me to cower and retreat. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and continued responding to supportive messages. The next morning brought a flood of notifications as my post went viral overnight. Local community groups shared it alongside their own encounters with Ethan or my mother. Former classmates recounted witnessing my mother's strange behavior during my childhood, and another woman came forward describing Ethan's abuse before me. Her name was Megan, and she'd dated Ethan briefly in college. Her message described controlling behaviors that mirrored my experience, monitoring her whereabouts, isolating her from friends, explosive anger when challenged. "I got out after 6 months," she wrote. "I can't imagine surviving years of it. You're incredibly strong." While preparing for work, Nicole texted urging me to check the bookstore's social media page, where I discovered dozens of one-star reviews from newly created accounts claiming I stole merchandise and mistreated customers. Each review followed a similar pattern, vague accusations with specific mentions of my name, clearly designed to damage both me and the store. Dana called to assure me Kenneth was working with the platforms to remove the fraudulent reviews, but suggested I take the day off given the escalating situation. "Take care of yourself today," she said. "We'll handle things here." Her support was still surprising. I wasn't used to people believing me or protecting me. Around noon, a delivery person brought flowers to my apartment with a card reading, "I know where you sleep. This ends when I say it ends." The arrangement was elaborate and expensive, roses and lilies in a crystal vase. The delivery person was long gone before I read the card, its threatening message hidden in a sealed envelope. I immediately contacted Melissa, who advised filing restraining orders against both Ethan and my mother. "This is textbook escalation," she explained. "The public exposure threatens their control, so they're trying to reassert it through fear." She outlined what evidence we'd need and how to prepare for the hearing. That evening, my building's fire alarm triggered an evacuation, though firefighters found no actual fire, just a pulled alarm on my floor. Residents gathered in the parking lot in various states of dress, some annoyed, others concerned. The night air was chilly, and I hugged my arms around myself, scanning the crowd for any familiar faces. Outside, I noticed my mother sitting in a parked car across the street, smiling directly at me when our eyes met. She didn't try to hide or look away, just maintained eye contact with a satisfied smile that sent chills down my spine. She wanted me to see her, to know she could disrupt my life at will. After a sleepless night, I met Melissa at the courthouse to file for restraining orders, though she cautioned this wouldn't completely stop them, only provide legal leverage if they continued. The courthouse felt different this time, still intimidating but somewhat familiar. I recognized some of the security guards and clerks from my divorce proceedings. 2 days later, my bank froze my account due to suspicious activity. Someone had attempted multiple large transfers using my home internet connection. The notification came through while I was at work, a series of security alerts about attempted transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Panic rose in my throat as I realized I couldn't access my limited funds. At the bank, a manager named Reese helped me review the attempted transactions and suggested someone had accessed my network. He was younger than I expected for a manager, with a patient manner as he explained digital security in terms I could understand. "Your Wi-Fi password was likely compromised," he explained, showing me the IP address logs. I immediately changed all passwords and contacted my internet provider to secure my connection. The technical support representative walked me through setting up a new router with enhanced security features, explaining how to create stronger passwords and enable two-factor authentication on important accounts. The harassment took an unexpected turn when Child Protective Services called about an anonymous report claiming I housed children in unsafe conditions. The investigator, Samantha, quickly determined the report was malicious after finding my spotless, childless apartment, explaining such false reports often occur during contentious divorces. Samantha was thorough but kind, asking to see each room while explaining the process. "We're required to investigate every report," she said, "but it's clear there's no issue here." She made notes on her clipboard, documenting the false report. "This happens more often than you'd think," she added with a sigh. "People weaponizing agencies to harass others." Nevertheless, neighbors who witnessed the CPS visit began giving me suspicious looks. Mrs. Grayson from across the hall, who had previously been friendly, now hurried her grandchildren past my door when they visited. The maintenance man took longer to respond to my requests. Each interaction reinforced my growing isolation. The campaign against me intensified with fake dating profiles using my photos and information, leading strange men to appear at my apartment and workplace. One particularly persistent man insisted we had arranged to meet, showing me explicit messages supposedly from me. His confusion turned to anger when I explained the profile was fake, as if I had personally deceived him. My car was keyed, and flyers with my face and false accusations appeared throughout my neighborhood. The flyers were crudely made but effective. My photo with words like thief, mentally unstable, and dangerous in bold letters. I tore down as many as I could find, but not before many neighbors had seen them. Each incident eroded my confidence until I received an unexpected message from my cousin Harper, whom I hadn't spoken with in years after my mother drove us apart. She had seen my post, believed me, and offered to meet. The message appeared in my inbox late one night, her familiar name bringing a rush of memories from childhood. Summers spent together at our grandparents' lake house, secrets shared under blanket forts. At a cafe far from my apartment, Harper explained how my mother had systematically alienated anyone who questioned her treatment of me, spreading rumors about me to extended family for years. Harper looked much the same as I remembered, just older and with shorter hair. She fidgeted with her coffee cup as she spoke, clearly uncomfortable with the revelations. "Aunt Linda told everyone you were troubled," she explained, referring to my mother. "Said you made up stories for attention, that you were jealous and manipulative." I'm ashamed I believed it. Her honesty was refreshing after so many lies. The cafe bustled around us, normal people having normal conversations while my world continued to unravel. She squeezed my hand and assured me that many family members were reassessing everything they'd been told about me after seeing my post. "Uncle Jim always had doubts," she said, mentioning my father's brother. "And Grandma never bought into it completely. They want to reach out but aren't sure you'd welcome it." The next day, Dana reluctantly informed me someone had called in a bomb threat mentioning me by name. Though police found nothing, Kenneth suggested I take a paid leave of absence until things calmed down. The bookstore was filled with police officers and bomb-sniffing dogs, customers evacuated to the sidewalk. Dana looked stressed and tired as she relayed Kenneth's decision. I understood but worried about my financial situation despite Dana's offer of a month's salary. The envelope she handed me contained a check and a handwritten note of support from the staff. Their signatures at the bottom, Dana's neat script, Nicole's artistic flourish, others I'd come to know, brought tears to my eyes. That night, someone threw a rock through my living room window with a note reading, "Whores don't deserve peace." The crash of breaking glass jolted me awake from a fitful sleep. Shards glittered on my carpet in the moonlight, and the cool night air rushed into my apartment. The rock sat amid the destruction, its threatening message tied with twine. The responding officers took a report but seemed uninterested in what they viewed as merely another domestic dispute. One officer sighed as he wrote down the details, his partner barely glancing at the broken window. "We'll add it to the file," the first officer said, his tone suggesting the file was already substantial and unlikely to lead anywhere. Harper called and insisted I move into her secured building across town. Initially hesitant to endanger her, I relented when she pointed out that isolation was exactly what Ethan and my mother wanted. Her apartment was on the 4th floor of a building with keycard access and a 24-hour doorman. "They can't get to you here," she assured me as she helped carry my suitcases. After moving my essential belongings to Harper's spare room, we implemented new security measures, creating new email addresses and phone numbers while maximizing privacy settings on all accounts. We spent an evening hunched over our laptops, methodically working through each account, changing security questions, and removing personal information. For several days, things remained quiet, as I focused on finding remote work and meeting Harper's friends who knew nothing of my history. The normalcy was healing, dinner conversations that didn't revolve around my problems, movie nights where I could laugh without guilt, mornings where I didn't wake up dreading the day ahead. Then Harper received a letter at her workplace containing a USB drive with intimate photos of me from my marriage that I hadn't known existed. The accompanying note suggested Harper should know who she's harboring. Harper's hands shook as she showed me the letter, her face pale with anger and concern. The photos were taken while I slept, or when Ethan had insisted on private photos that he promised would never be shared. Seeing them now, knowing others had seen this violation of my privacy, brought a wave of nausea so intense I had to rush to the bathroom. Harper waited outside the door, her concern evident in her gentle knocking. Harper immediately brought the evidence to me, her face pale with anger as she insisted we report this illegal revenge burn to the police. "This crosses a legal line," she said firmly. "We're reporting it right now." Her determination gave me strength when mine faltered. The responding officer was more sympathetic than previous ones, explaining that distributing intimate images without consent constituted a crime, and connected us with a victim advocate named Angela. Officer Rivera took detailed notes, handling the USB drive with gloved hands as evidence. "This type of harassment often escalates," she warned. "Be extra vigilant." After reviewing my case, Angela explained I was experiencing escalation because my ex and mother were losing control over me, and public support threatened them. She warned they might attempt something more dramatic, and advised strengthening my support network while continuing to document everything. Angela's office was in a community center, filled with resources and pamphlets about domestic violence. She was younger than I expected, with a direct manner that balanced compassion with practicality. "The most dangerous time for abuse victims is when they leave," she explained. "Your ex is following a textbook pattern of escalation. 3 days before my restraining order hearing, I received an email from an unfamiliar law firm representing a woman named Blair who claimed to be pregnant with Ethan's child and sought a DNA test from me to rule out maternal genetic conditions, a medically nonsensical request clearly meant to unsettle me before court. The email was professionally formatted with legal terminology designed to intimidate. I read it 3 times, trying to make sense of the illogical request. How would my DNA be relevant to Ethan's supposed child? It was a transparent attempt to throw me off balance, to make me question myself right before the hearing. Melissa confirmed this wasn't a legitimate legal request, and advised ignoring it. But Blair herself appeared at Harper's building the next day, creating a scene in the lobby before the doorman refused her entry. Through the security camera feed, I watched a woman I'd never met shouting my name, demanding to speak with me about her baby's future. The doorman, a retired police officer named Marcus, calmly but firmly escorted her outside. On the day of the restraining order hearing, I dressed in clothes projecting confidence rather than the submissive outfits Ethan had always demanded. I chose a navy blue blazer over a simple white blouse, professional and composed rather than the feminine dresses Ethan had insisted made me look less difficult. My hair was pulled back neatly, my minimal makeup applied with steady hands despite my nerves. Harper, Nicole, and Dana accompanied me for support. Their presence behind me in the courtroom was a physical reminder that I wasn't alone anymore. Harper squeezed my shoulder as we waited. Nicole kept checking that I had water, and Dana's calm presence grounded me when anxiety threatened to overwhelm. Outside the courthouse, Ethan and my mother waited with an audience of family members, church friends, and Ethan's coworkers in an obvious intimidation attempt. They stood in a group on the steps, a wall of disapproving faces I had to walk past. My mother wore her church clothes, a modest dress and pearls that projected respectability. Ethan was in a suit I recognized, one I'd helped him select for important meetings. Inside the small hearing room, Ethan and my mother sat with their expensive-looking lawyer while we sat with Melissa. Their lawyer had a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He arranged papers with practiced efficiency, occasionally whispering to Ethan, who nodded with feigned concern. The judge, an older woman with perceptive eyes, reviewed our documentation carefully before proceedings began. Judge Watkins had silver hair pulled into a tight bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She flipped through our evidence with methodical attention, occasionally making notes without revealing her thoughts. Melissa methodically presented our evidence of harassment, the fake reviews, threatening flowers, broken window, intimate images sent to Harper, and numerous other incidents. She spoke clearly and confidently, connecting each incident to establish a pattern of escalating behavior. The timeline she presented showed not random events but a calculated campaign of terror. When the opposition's turn came, their lawyer portrayed me as unstable and vindictive, claiming I was defaming Ethan and my mother out of spite. He spoke with practiced sympathy about his client's concern for my mental health, suggesting they were victims of my delusions rather than perpetrators of abuse. Their first witness, Blair, testified that Ethan only strayed because I was emotionally abusive and sexually withholding. She claimed to be pregnant with his child, and that I had sent her threatening messages. Blair was younger than me, perhaps early 20s, with carefully applied makeup and nervous mannerisms. She twisted a tissue in her hands as she spoke, occasionally glancing at Ethan for approval. During cross-examination, Melissa demonstrated these alleged messages came from an account created after I had already changed my social media handles due to harassment. She methodically dismantled Blair's testimony, highlighting inconsistencies and improbabilities until Blair's confident assertions crumbled under scrutiny. The most devastating moment came when my mother took the stand, looking directly at me as she described a troubled child I didn't recognize, claiming I had been defiant, disturbed, and manipulative since childhood. She fabricated incidents that never occurred and portrayed herself as a concerned parent who had repeatedly sought help for my supposed issues. My mother's performance was convincing. Tears at the right moments, a trembling voice when describing her efforts to help me, concerned glances at the judge. She described a childhood I didn't recognize, filled with tantrums and manipulation that never happened. Each lie felt like another betrayal, another erasure of my reality. Ethan followed with similar performance, portraying himself as a devoted husband blindsided by my mental breakdown, and expressing false concern about my need for psychiatric help. He described finding my disturbing journals, the documentation of his abuse, and how he'd tried everything to get me help. His practiced sincerity might have been convincing to someone who hadn't lived through his violence. When my turn came to testify, I felt strangely calm despite their stares. I clearly described the reality of my marriage, the isolation, control, and fear I endured daily. I detailed the harassment campaign since my divorce and addressed the lies Blair and my mother had told, emphasizing that everything I presented was thoroughly documented through text messages, photos, witness statements, and police reports. My voice grew stronger as I spoke, gaining confidence with each truth I reclaimed. I described specific incidents. The night Ethan broke my wrist and told the ER doctor I'd fallen, the time my mother saw bruises on my arms and told me to wear long sleeves to avoid embarrassing him, the systematic way they'd isolated me from anyone who might have helped. After deliberation, the judge granted restraining orders against both Ethan and my mother, requiring them to maintain at least 500 feet distance from me, my residence, and workplace, prohibiting contact through any means including third parties. She further referred the case to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into potential charges of harassment, stalking, and non-consensual distribution of intimate images. Judge Watkins spoke firmly as she delivered her ruling, looking directly at Ethan and my mother. The evidence presented demonstrates a clear pattern of harassment and intimidation, she stated. This court finds the respondent's testimony lacks credibility given the substantial documentation of their actions. Her words validated what I'd known all along. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't making things up, and I didn't deserve any of what they'd done. Relief washed over me so intensely I nearly collapsed, with Harper steadying me as she whispered that I had succeeded. The paper in my hands, the official restraining order, represented more than legal protection. It was external validation, proof that someone in authority had seen the truth and believed me. Leaving the courtroom, I glimpsed Ethan's mask of concern replaced by cold fury, while my mother refused to look at me. Their supporters murmured among themselves, some appearing confused by the outcome. A few looked at me with new eyes, perhaps seeing cracks in the story they'd been told about me. Melissa warned that the restraining orders wouldn't necessarily end the harassment and advised continued vigilance. This is a significant step, she said as we walked toward the exit. But stay alert and keep documenting anything that happens. Her practical advice kept me grounded even as emotion threatened to overwhelm me. Though the battle wasn't over, I felt fundamentally changed. The scared, submissive woman conditioned to accept abuse had vanished, replaced by someone stronger who refused to be silenced or shamed. Whatever Ethan and my mother attempted next, I would face it with newfound strength and the support of people who truly cared about me. As we stepped outside into the sunlight, Harper linked her arm through mine. Dana and Nicole flanked us protectively, forming a shield of friendship against the stares of Ethan's supporters. For the first time in years, I felt truly safe. Not because the danger had passed completely, but because I was no longer facing it alone. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. I still jumped at unexpected noises, still checked locks multiple times, still had nightmares about Ethan's hands around my throat. But each day brought small victories. A full night's sleep, a genuine laugh, a decision made without fear of punishment. I was reclaiming my life one moment at a time, and no one could take that away from me again.